Thanks for tuning in to the Pride, Prejudice, and Popcorn podcast, a companion to our book and film club by the same name that will be going on for the entire year of 2025 as we celebrate Jane Austen's 250th birthday during our year with Jane Austen. On this podcast, we'll be having some fun doing a broad overview of Jane Austen's work, but if you are interested in more, including our in-person book and film club, in-depth discussions and lectures, and family-friendly activities, please check out our website and calendar for those, as well as other great events and our library podcast, Books and Beyond. All this and more can be found at winterparklibrary.org. Welcome back to the Pride, Prejudice, and Popcorn podcast. My name is Emerald, one of the Winter Park Librarians. Today we're going to be talking about Jane Austen's last published novel, and if I've got the timeline right, it's also the last novel she completed. And as usual, we will be spoiling it. Joining me, as usual, is Delicia, youth team member, blog coordinator for the Jane Austen Summer Program, and administrator for the Jane Austen Literacy Foundation. We also welcome back Lisa Blue, our teen librarian, who joined us for our first episode of Sense and Sensibility. And we are also joined by Rachel from our public services team. Hello.
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 Before we jump into Persuasion, I want to quickly highlight something that we will have going on through the summer. This episode will be releasing in May. Lisa, could you please share a little information about the Write Like Jane contest, the submission dates, contest rules, where they can find information, etc.?
Sure. We thought Jane writes so wonderfully, and we know people today also write wonderfully, so why doesn't everyone just try to write like Jane? The contest opens on May 1st. Submissions are due by August 8th, and it is open to youth ages 10 through 17 in that category and adults 18 and up. And we're asking them to write, I think it's 7,500 words or less, and use Jane Austen's wit and themes and romantic notions to create your own story. It can be something that's set in the same period as Jane Austen's stories. It could be a modern-day adaptation, or it can just be inspired by that. You can find all the information on our online calendar of events. Look for May 1st, Write Like Jane reading contest.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So, Delicia and Lisa, we know you are both longtime Jane Austen readers. So, Rachel, would you mind sharing with us your familiarity level with Jane Austen, her books, this book in particular? Do you have a first introduction to Regency literature or the theme of the Regency era? It doesn't necessarily have to be Jane Austen.
Yeah, well, mine was Jane Austen. I first read Pride and Prejudice in high school, and then I've reread it since then. I've always been a big fan of the 2005 adaptation of Pride and Prejudice. Sense and Sensibilities one I really love as well, but I had never read Persuasion before. I was surprised that it was so short. I think maybe the shortest of her books. So I came into this story in particular without any context, completely fresh.
We did Mansfield Park right before this, it was a little bit of work to get through it. So this one felt like a breeze. So let's see. Lisa and Delicia, in terms of this book specifically, what was your first time reading it? Was this your first time reading it? Where does it rank on your Jane Austen level books?
Well, Lisa here. This is my third or fourth time reading Persuasion. Okay. I came to it first through one of the adaptations, the 1995 one, and I loved the story, so I thought I need to read the actual book. And I experienced it through an audiobook, A Very Good Reader. So that was a wonderful journey for me. And I sort of vacillate between Persuasion and Pride and Prejudice when someone says, what's your favorite Jane Austen? Today it's Persuasion. Tomorrow it might be Pride and Prejudice.
That's fair. How about you, Delicia?
So Persuasion was the fourth Jane Austen novel I read. Don't quote me on that. It is not only my absolute favorite Jane Austen novel, it's my favorite novel of all time.
Oh, really?
Yes, I just love it. I've lost count of how many times I've read it. I did read the book before I saw the 1995 and 2007 adaptations. It's one of the few Austen novels where I read the book before seeing any of the adaptations. So I came a little bit later to Persuasion.
Well, Persuasion is the last novel completed by Jane Austen, and it was published 6 months after her death in 1817, along with Northanger Abbey. We follow Miss Anne Elliot, the least favored of Sir Walter's 3 daughters. At 19, Anne accepted an engagement to an undistinguished naval officer, Frederick Wentworth, but was persuaded to break off the engagement by her late mother's friend and Anne's stand-in mother figure, the Lady Russell. Years pass, and the family is forced to rent out their home and move to Bath to cut down on living expenses, but Anne stays behind for a time with her sister Mary, who is the only one to have married. To her surprise, the home is rented to Admiral Croft, whose brother-in-law is the very same officer, now captain, whose heart she broke and who has not yet forgiven her. Our main characters are Anne Elliot, Captain Wentworth, Anne's sister Mary, and the rest of the Musgrove family, Mary's in-laws, and that includes Henrietta and Louisa, Sir Walter and Elizabeth Elliot, Lady Russell, and Mr. Elliot. But we also have the Harvilles, Captain Benwick, Mrs. Clay, and of course Mrs. Smith, who reveals the sinister secret of Mr. Elliot. I feel like this book had a lot of people in it for being so short. What were some of your first impressions or some of your thoughts as you worked through this book, either the first time or this most recent time that you've read it?
So I absolutely love Anne Elliot. She is my absolute favorite literary character. Just can never get enough of Anne Elliot. And just the love story and this whole notion of second chances is just such a hard novel to describe, and it's so beautifully written too. There's so many gorgeous passages in there as well.
I agree. I really enjoyed Anne as well. Coming off of Mansfield Park, something about her felt to me like a more completed, more developed, like what Fanny could have been. I feel like Anne and Eleanor would love to like sit down together and just hash out their families before going back to being the level-headed ones in the household. Lisa or Rachel, what did you think?
Well, like Delicia, I absolutely love Anne Elliot, and I identify with her in some respects. I wrote down on a piece of paper that she's introspective, emotionally complex, quiet, strength, and resilient. And I like to think that I'm more of the quiet type in situations that she finds herself in. I'm much like her. I wish I was more like Lizzie Bennet, who has some very intelligent things to say in situations like that. But Anne is just more, I don't want to say that she's passive, but she allows other people to sort of steer conversations, and she interjects brilliantly when required to. And I also have a very soft spot for Frederick Wentworth because he is the person who is hurt, but the way when he reconnects with Anne, the way he treats her with a little bit of petulance, I think that I identify with that kind of behavior as well. So.
I really liked Captain Wentworth. I think he is, so we've done at this point Sense and Sensibility, we've done Mansfield Park, and now we're on Persuasion. Out of those three, Captain Wentworth is the first romantic interest that I am actually rooting for. Sense and Sensibility was great. There were parts of Mansfield Park I really enjoyed, but those love interests, I kind of felt like, girls, you can do better than this. This was the first one that I was like, Captain Wentworth is really great, and there's something that does feel very authentic about him. So I agree with that as well.
But I want to hear what Rachel thinks about these characters for the first time.
Yeah. I would say just throughout the book, I was continually impressed with how Austen was able to like accomplish all of this in such a short span of pages. Like, it has all of the classic elements that are in her stories, but it's so just like it's such a tight story. I would also hop on the Anne Elliot appreciation train. I found her to be way more relatable than Elizabeth in Pride and Prejudice, just for like the long amounts of introspection we get to hear from her. And I think I think of myself also as like a more quiet, observational person. I love that she's described as like very practical and yeah.
And I think you're right, Lisa. Like, it's not passive. She's not passive at all. She's so put together, and everyone, including her family members who kind of look down on her a little bit, whenever there's a problem, they all immediately look at Anne and expect her to solve it, whether it's something as trivial as, well, we want to go to this dinner, but our kid is sick. It's more dramatic than that, I realize. Or it's somebody has fallen down and cracked their head open, and Anne is the only one who knows how to handle the situation.
I was not expecting that part. I was like, we play from 0 to 100. Like,
really quickly. What a nice beach day, and it's all over.
And it's possible that we all relate to her more, and she is the one everybody looks to because she is significantly older than other Jane Austen protagonists, being, I think she's 28. Wait, is my math right? She was 19, and then 8 years later, 27. She's 27.
There we go.
So in Regency period, that's a middle-aged lady. So.
I think there's a joke made about that in season 2 of Bridgerton when they're talking about how old Kate is, and she's also 27, and somebody like calls her a spinster or something like that. All right, so some other things that are present in this book that I would really like to touch on. The Navy. So the members of the Elliot family are really, aside from Anne, of course, are really sort of obsessed with where you are in the social hierarchy. You know, her father doesn't want to rent the house to somebody who he deems as too lowly to deserve the house, but also not to somebody higher than him that he would have to compete with. He's very vain. Mary kind of looks down on her, is it her in-laws, for not having as much wealth as they do, or something along those lines. But then we look at the Navy, where Captain Wentworth is coming from. And Delicia, maybe you can explain a little bit about why the Navy and sort of upward motion of men that go into the Navy, why that plays a part in this book.
Okay, so brief history lesson, so to speak. So for hundreds of years prior to the events of Persuasion, it was the custom for sailors, if they capture a ship, you sell the ship and the cargo on it, and the cash gets split. So it's pretty much prize money. And that was a way for men who served to earn a lot of money. And that's what happened with Captain Wentworth. Where all of a sudden he's rich, even though he comes from very low circumstances.
And I think there is a segment where Anne's father discusses at length about why they kind of disapprove of the Navy, because it, takes sons from well-esteemed families and they're just, scrubbing the deck like everybody else, but then sons from, lower class families are suddenly able to rise to these high ranking positions and become respectable members of society, which I think sounds great, but yes. Sir Walter Elliot didn't think so.
Yeah, I think I have the exact line.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, where he's talking about his dislike for sailors, so to speak. First is being the means of bringing persons of obscure birth into undue distinction and raising men to honors which their fathers and grandfathers never dreamt of. And then, of course, there's the other part of why he has an issue with sailors.
Yes, he's very vain.
Yes, age.
That was so wild. I feel like, at least so far from the 3 books that we've talked about, Jane Austen has this way of giving the reader, quote, the ick about just right off the bat. In this first chapter, she's going to tell you, this is who is going to annoy you for the rest of the book. You're not going to like them. In Sense and Sensibility, it's the brother. In Mansfield Park, it's the mother and the aunts, talking about how kind they are to take Fanny in, like how good they are. And then here we get Sir Walter Elliot and Elizabeth, and it's just immediately
I feel like in modern day, if Sir Walter Elliott lived in modern day, he would be a TikTok influencer for gowans and all kinds of skincares. He'd even have tutorials on how to properly apply those to the face.
Oh, goodness, yes. He's very obsessed with it. So going back to the Navy, though, there's also a personal connection with the Navy to Jane Austen herself.
Yeah, so two of Jane's brothers, Frank and Charles, they had successful careers in the Royal Navy. Frank, he rose to become Admiral of the Fleet, very fancy, and Charles was Rear Admiral. And Jane, she kept a regular correspondence with them while they were away. And these experiences did provide her with a background, the background material for her so-called naval novels, Mansfield Park and Persuasion. And when James Edward Austen Lee, her nephew, wrote the memoir about his aunt, here's a line: "With ships and sailors, she felt herself at home, or at least could always trust to a brotherly critic to keep her right."
Do you know if her brothers experienced the same upward motion wealth-wise that Wentworth did?
Yes, probably not to the extent of Captain Wentworth. I mean, he really got paid. But yes, they were successful.
So there's a lot of things we can talk about in this short, sweet, snappy book. There's Anne's relationship with her immediate family versus the relationship that she has with her in-laws, extended family, and neighbors who seem to respect her significantly more than her father does. There's Lady Russell. There's the romance. There's the supposed romance between one of the sisters and Captain Wentworth until she gets injured. What are some other things that stuck out to you guys in this book that you would like to spend a little time on?
Well, I definitely want to talk about the characters that we dislike because while I think universally don't like Sir Walter, he's kind of a ridiculous character. So I
You're
have to say,
supposed to
Sir
dislike
Walter,
him, right?
And Mary, her youngest sister, is a constant source of humor with her. I'm so ill. I'm near death. Oh, pass the ham.
She's like, I'm sicker than I've ever been. Yes, I agree. Those are two characters that you are supposed to dislike, but at the same time, like you said, you're supposed to be somewhat amused by them. Who are some characters that you absolutely do not like?
Her older sister. She's terrible.
Elizabeth?
Yes.
Yeah.
And as the eldest sister myself, I look back upon when I was a child treating my sisters, my younger sisters, in a horrible fashion, and I see Elizabeth treating Anne like this, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I identify with that, and I regret everything.
Yeah. And there's something to be said for the way that Elizabeth and Sir Walter just so look down on Anne, and yet Anne is the only one in the family who's gotten any proposals. There was the engagement that she had with Captain Wentworth, which, sure, they deemed wasn't good enough and it broke off. But also, Mary's husband originally wanted to marry Anne.
Yep.
Elizabeth has no suitors in sight. Mary was a second choice, and yet Sir Walter is looking at Anne as if she's like the lowest card he has to play, if you want to think of it that way.
To bring up another character, how do we feel about Lady Russell? Because, like, in some ways you can look at her as kind of like the antagonist of, like, romance, because Jane Austen loves a romance, but in other ways, like, you have to look at the context of the Regency era and all she was, like, trying to do for the family, like, stepping in the mother's absence. So, like, it's a mixed bag.
I have mixed feelings about Lady Russell. I think you're supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
I do not care for her. I think that she oversteps the role of just being a stand-in mother and comforting Anne and being there for her and, yeah, maybe guiding her a little bit. But she really puts herself in this family's business.
Yes, and I think oftentimes they kind of invite that. At least Sir Walter has a very high opinion of her opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I do think she oversteps, and she has I feel like she really comes from a place that she feels like she's doing what's best for Anne. But it's like, mind your business, lady.
And to be fair, she is the only one connected to that like immediate household. She was friends with Anne's mother, who is constantly saying that, oh, this person's, at least if nothing else, their best quality is that they see how much better Anne is than everybody else. So I do appreciate that. But again, in the end, like, her judgments are wrong. She is rooting for the romance between Anne and her cousin.
Ugh.
Mr. Elliot, does he have a
Mr.
title?
Elliot,
yeah.
Mr. Elliot. Rooting for that match to go down. She was against Wentworth in the beginning, and yeah, she just seems to, again, being blinded by that class standing.
So, I will say, when I first read Persuasion, I didn't like Lady Russell. But as I've kept reading Persuasion, I don't think she was entirely wrong. Which I know is like a controversial opinion, because you're supposed to be rooting for, you know, Anne and Captain Wentworth, and that is the love story. They do belong together. But, and this is what I love about Austen's novels in general, as you keep reading them over and over again, you notice something that you didn't see before. And one thing I always, like in the last few times I've read it, that's gone to me is in a novel where it says he had been lucky in his profession, but spending freely what had come freely, had realized nothing. I do think he was a little immature at that time, where he got all this money and then just spent it, and it's like, well, I'm going to earn more. I'm going to get more. And I can see from Lady Russell's perspective that this is someone where her goddaughter may end up in a bad, situation. I wish I could attribute this to the person who said it. I was in a book club once, a virtual book club, and someone said that if Anne would have married him at that time, she could have very possibly ended up like Fanny's mom in Mansfield Park.
Oh. I think that's a fair point to make.
Yes, and practically speaking, sure, that makes a lot of sense. But
Right.
I'm the true love trumps
I
all
know.
camp.
I did like how, like you said, we know that this is the love interest. We know that this is the match that we're rooting for. And I enjoyed that, because I think we talked about how with the other two books, there was a level of not being 100% sure who was going to end up with who. But this, right off the bat, I'm like, oh, yes, these two, love it together. And when Mr. Elliot does enter the scene, I'm not interested at all.
Well, he's a very loathsome character, I think.
It's that same sort of Willoughby aspect where it's like, I know that there's something. I don't know what it is yet, but there is something inauthentic about you and your sudden presence here.
I was just waiting for the classic, like, spilling the tea scene where Mrs. Smith, I think, it ends up being just, like, monologues about why specifically we should hate him. And I'm like, yeah, this is it.
And she kind of feels out the territory at first. She's trying to kind of see, how does Anne feel about Mr. Elliot before I tell her what I have? I think there's a TikTok that makes a joke about that, where it's like when you meet somebody and you're testing the waters to see if they dislike the same person that you dislike.
Well, I don't know. I mean, is it possible that if she thought that Anne truly loved Mr. Elliot, that she was not going to be
I think
explicit?
she kind of alludes to the fact that if Anne had already decided to marry him and was happy with it, that she wasn't going to share the whole story. She was instead going to just maybe ask her, hey, can you petition him on my behalf for the sake of whoever's friendship? I don't know that she would have shared the nitty-gritty about how Mr. Elliot really kind of preyed on her husband and just completely she was completely forsaken by him, by somebody that was supposed to be their friend.
And that's where, like, the contrast comes in with Lady Russell. Like, in this case, Persuasion was the right thing, like persuading Anne to stay away from him.
To stay away from
To
Wentworth?
stay away from Mr. Elliot.
Mr. Smith,
Mr.
Mrs. Smith's persuasion.
Mrs.
Yeah,
Smith.
Mrs.
Okay,
Smith's persuasion.
I got confused because I
Sorry.
was like, wait a second, Lady Russell was all for this.
No.
She was ready for Anne to be lady of the house.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
All right, let's go ahead. Major themes in this book include class rigidity, social mobility, persuasion, public versus private sphere. Where do you see these themes best represented in the books, or what are some other themes that you think are present that we haven't already discussed? You are right, because this just reminded me of what I wanted to talk about. But you go first.
Well, I wrote on a piece of paper, love and regret are timeless themes that we can all relate to. And the notion that true love can endure over time is something we can aspire to.
That was very beautiful, Lisa.
Oh, thank you very much. I don't know. I was inspired.
It's the one that got away.
Yes.
And second chance romance.
And that is a very popular trope
Yes.
in romance books today, second chance romance.
And that's there. And there could even be an argument made for like returning to the hometown, where Wentworth though is the one who went away and made a career for himself, and now he's back in the small town.
That's a valid point. And would you say that Persuasion could perhaps be the OG second chance romance?
I would agree with that, but I don't know as many of the books that were published at that time. I don't know if there's anything before that, but if you said that to me, I would say yes, I agree. Delicia, what do you think?
You know, this whole conversation about the romance novels, I don't read romance novels, and I was like sitting here thinking, oh, is that why I kind of agreed with Lady Russell? Because I don't read romance novels. Like, oh my gosh, I'm not a romantic.
You have
You're
a
like,
more practical approach to love.
Oh goodness, is that I don't know. Well,
Much more sense than sensibility.
Yeah.
yes.
But I think that you have something there. I think that there are, tropes that we see in Jane Austen's work that we continue to see played out over and over and over again. And it still works for us. And it's why we can still go back and watch the period dramas over and over and over again, because it still works. And it just kind of gives you exactly what it is that you're looking for, while, like Rachel was saying, having the added layer of there's so much more that she's talking about and addressing at the same time. When we talk about the public versus private sphere, and again, Delicia, maybe you have more to highlight this, but that's the idea that there's two worlds. There's what happens inside the house and then what happens out in society, with the idea that the wife, the woman, is the head of the private sphere inside the house and the man heads the public sphere outside. Do I have that right?
Yes.
Okay. But I want to talk about the Crofts.
I love the Crofts.
I do too.
Love the Crofts.
There's several marriages in this book, and all of them are kind of silly. And I mean, Mary and her husband, I think, are rarely in the same room together at any point.
Can you blame him?
Mary doesn't even know where her kids are. He got hurt, and she's trying to go to this dinner. I said, Mary, this child dislocated his collarbone. Anyway, but then we see the Crofts, and there's kind of this running joke that's going through the whole book about how the Crofts are always together. So why is that a joke in the book, and why are we drawing attention to that? But I love it.
Yes. The Crofts, you can say, that's an unusual marriage. Kind of, it's more of a modern day marriage of how we think of people who spend a lot of times with their spouses. One of the most interesting things I find about their relationship is Mrs. Croft, in a way, she's kind of this prototype feminist. Like how she's able to negotiate about Killinch Hall, like the taxes, and so she has like this strong business acumen. And he's not threatened by that. He treats her as an equal. It's a wonderful marriage. I would say it's probably besides like your leading characters, is one of the best marriages in all of Austen novels.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we know that she has gotten on the ship with him so that they could, stay together even when he was at sea. Like you said, she was able to kind of negotiate for their living situation, which was probably really unusual. I really want to talk about the scene with the carriage when Anne gets a ride from them in the carriage, and he, of course, is driving, and she reaches over and takes the reins from him, and they're driving the carriage together. And I thought that was such a sweet little snapshot of this marriage. And they're just always together, and they opt out of going places because they'd rather hang out together at home. And the other characters kind of make a joke about this, but at the same time, like you said, they're the happiest marriage.
They're not just husband and wife, but they're best friends.
Yeah.
Especially during a time where men and women had also different pursuits, different interests.
Mm-hmm.
I can't picture Mrs. Croft sitting in the sewing room with the other ladies knitting while Admiral Croft is out shooting with the men. I can't picture that.
But they have the kind of relationship that if they are like that, Admiral Croft is out shooting and she's in the room, they're going to meet up afterwards and tell each other everything.
Most likely, yes.
They are going to download all of the gossip that they got from both of those places. Admiral Croft knows everything about her girlfriend. She knows everything about what's going on in the men's world. I would bet money on that.
Yep.
All right, so let's see some other themes that are present before we move on. Anything else that I did not list that you feel like is also there? I know we talked about some of the traditional romance tropes like second chance, returning home, the one that got away.
Well, something I noticed in particular about this book that I very much enjoyed and I think lends itself very well to the numerous adaptations is a lot of the romance in this is much in the subtext, the glances that are shared, the pauses, the social interactions, where not a lot of dialogue is used to express these thoughts and feelings like there is in maybe Pride and Prejudice.
Right.
But it's very subtle in this, and I like that.
What did you guys think about that? Because we do have that sort of Anne is kind of anxious about seeing Wentworth again, but then when they do finally end up in the same room together, they're working real hard to ignore each other. What was your impression when you first read those portions? What did you think of Wentworth? What did you think of Anne's attitude about everything? She always just seems so put together, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think when I first read it, I felt so sorry for Anne. And I still do, as, you know, each time I read a novel. But I did not like Wentworth.
Really?
Yeah, I was just like, oh my gosh, will you give this poor girl a break?
It was so clear that he was still angry at her. Okay, so our roses and thorns. Your rose will be the most rewarding part of the book, your favorite part of the book. Your thorn is going to be what you found to be the most challenging, anything that you didn't like about the book, maybe something you thought was lacking. So what are our roses and thorns?
I think Rachel should go first since she's the newbie with this book.
I would say my rose is just going into this knowing that this was her last novel.
Mm-hmm.
And so I could kind of treat it as like a bookend to her writing career and see how by this time in Austen's writing journey, to me it seems like she's much more like blatant in her criticisms of like the era and society. My favorite part was when she just like outright comments on like all the authors being men and how like of course women are viewed this way, like all the stories are written by men. And I'm like, wow, she just really said it and mic dropped and peace out. I would say my thorn, even though I loved that it was brief, I think I had a little bit of trouble connecting with some of the characters just because of how short the story was. I don't think I was as personally invested as I was maybe in Pride and Prejudice just because we spend more time with them. But on the other hand, I think it's still like just such an excellent story told in that brief amount of time.
There is something about Persuasion that I feel like just feels so complete.
I know it probably should be the very romantic love letter at the end, which it is definitely.
We didn't talk about the letter.
I was gonna.
We'll talk about the letter. We'll circle back. We
I
have
was
to
gonna.
talk about the letter.
I think that tends to be nearly everyone's roles. I would say this is probably a little silly. So there's a part where Elizabeth and Sir Walter, they're delivering the invitations to the Musgroves. And when they come in, like how everyone kind of freezes. Um, and it's actually, I think I have, let me see if I can find the passage here. Is every time I always just laugh out loud, like literally. There's a chill goes through the room, like when they enter. And I don't know, I just found that like really funny. Like you imagine you walk into a room and that happens, everyone stops talking and it's like a chill, and even
worst
Anne, like,
nightmare.
yeah, Anne even felt it. And it's also funny to me because they probably don't even realize that they just bring a chill when they enter a room.
Oh boy.
But yeah, I just thought that was hilarious. But I think a thorn for me, I really could not stand Mary when Louisa's accident happened and Anne was supposed to stay in Lyme Regis. But Mary's like, oh, well, I'm, the sister-in-law. But, she knows she's going to be totally useless in, like, actually
Right.
caring for anyone. And even, I think Anne was bothered by that. It was just a pure selfishness and being, like, totally self-centered. And who can provide Louisa the best care and
Right.
attention? And it was not Mary.
There's something about like Sir Walter and his other two daughters where they want to be important and they want all the benefits of being important without putting any work into it. We also see that when they're reaching out to the cousin or the aunt that comes to Bath,
Lady Dalrymple.
Yes, Lady Dalrymple, where they are obsessing over how they're going to make an introduction to them, and you get this little history that shows that the reason that they're not talking is because they have not put any effort into the relationship at all over the years, to the point where they didn't even send a condolence note when somebody died. And now all of a sudden they're like, but we're important too. It's like, you guys have put nothing into this. So here we see Mary, who wants to be looked to, wants to be considered important, and it's like, but you're useless. You're not going to do anything. Lisa, what's your rose and thorn?
Well, other than the letter, which is one of the best letters in the history of fiction.
We do need to circle back to that absolutely after your rose and thorn.
I absolutely love that. But also at the end, when Anne has reciprocated Wentworth's feelings again and they're walking in the garden of Bath, and there is not a lot of dialogue there. There's actually almost none at all. We're told what they're saying, but we don't get the actual quotes. And I wrote, much of their walk is without dialogue shared with the reader. The intimacy doesn't seem, I can't even read my own handwriting. The intimacy isn't a dramatic outpouring, but it's rather a quiet understanding between the two of them of where they've been and where they are now. And I love that because in Pride and Prejudice, once the two have come together, there's a little bit of an awkward conversation where they're reliving some of their past occasions with each other. And I'm like, ooh, so awkward. You don't have to spell it out, put a fine point on it. So I really appreciated that. And the thorn that we have not talked about yet is Mrs. Clay. And I think she is one of the most sycophantic schemers I've ever come across in Jane Austen's work. And her collusion with Mr. Elliot even just was like nails on a chalkboard.
That's right. And then at the end, we find out that she's gone and married the sleazy Mr. Elliot.
Yeah.
A match made in heaven, and yet they're both going to get exactly what they want, and I'm not really happy about it. But we do see that in Jane Austen's book, where the people who don't really deserve a happy ending get one. They still get what they need. Willoughby ends up fine. Mrs. Clay and Mr. Elliot are going to end up perfectly fine.
Caroline Bingley didn't get anything.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that when we're on Pride and Prejudice. So let's talk about the letter. What have we got?
Well, he's overhearing a conversation he's having with his friend Captain Harville, and he realizes that she still has feelings for him based upon what she's telling Captain Harville. that she's loved him all this time. Nothing has faded, and he must respond in the means that he has at hand, which is writing a letter. So I don't know. I just think that there's something lovely about that he just can't contain himself anymore.
Right. There's the impulsiveness of it. I'm hearing this right now, and I need to write it down right now and give you this note before I lose my nerve, before it's too late, before I, have time to second guess what I'm feeling. What did you two think about the letter? Either how he wrote it, what it said, how Anne received it.
I think for me, when I read the letter, you just really feel it. And I think one thing for me is he does not really know what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. He doesn't know what to expect. It's just hoping.
Shoot your shot.
Yeah.
And he was even coming from a place of jealousy at that time. Ever since he arrived at Bath, he was jealous as all get out of Mr. Elliot. So he's just putting it all on the table.
Mm-hmm. It's such a release because we only hear from him in short bursts almost throughout the book, and then to hear this outpouring, it's just very cathartic in the best way. Perfect.
It was really satisfying. It gives you that satisfying romantic climax that I hadn't gotten from the other books quite yet. We Lisa, you and I had talked about how sometimes those things happen sort of behind closed doors, whereas this, we get the letter. We get to see what he feels. We get the big profession of love. And after he's been not quite as talkative through the whole book and not talking to Anne, but I think that there's something to be said for your point about, the intimacy that they have when they're walking through the garden at the end is the same sort of intimacy that they've had throughout the whole book. There's such an understanding between these two people, even when they're not really seeing eye to eye, even when they're trying to avoid each other, they still see each other and they know where the other person's head is at. All right, so our history segment, Persuasion was published in 1817. Normally, I've been listing events that take place the year the book is published, but Jane had passed away when this book was published. So instead, I'm going to look at some of the events that were occurring while she wrote the novel. According to Jasna's website, Jane started writing Persuasion in 1815 and completed it in 1816. Here are some of the events occurring during that time. The Napoleonic Wars. Napoleon escapes from Elba and marches on Paris in 1815, and we have the Battle of Waterloo in June of 1815, and he surrenders in July. Emma is published anonymously. Emma's going to be the next book that we talk about. So while she was writing Persuasion, people were reading Emma. The stethoscope is invented, which doesn't have anything to do with Jane, but I thought it was a fun fact. And of course, Jane Austen starts to feel ill, and she ultimately will not recover. Delicia, do you have any notes for us about the Napoleonic Wars and how that was affecting?
Oh, yes, I found my notes. So, Napoleonic France versus Britain, Prussia, Austria, Portugal, Spain, and multiple other countries. So, Napoleon wanted to expand French power across Europe and reclaim power in the so-called New World, which would be territories in the Caribbean and possibly the U.S. Don't quote me on that. I'm not a scholar of French history. So there were coalitions formed between the European countries to prevent him trying to take over everything. So Britain declared war on France in 1803, and this was the first stage of the Napoleonic Wars. The events in Persuasion take place during the period of peace.
Okay.
And it's a period of false peace because what happens is that in March 1815, Napoleon escaped from the island of Elba and reclaimed the throne. And he's defeated in the Battle of Waterloo in July 1815. And this is important because one thing we haven't talked about yet is how Persuasion ends, where it's that kind of question mark.
So like what's going to happen to Wentworth
exactly
moving forward?
Yes. So there's so we have this peace that's temporary, but you're going to have the Battle of Waterloo after this. So most likely he'll be called. Wow, I just made the ending really depressing.
No, not necessarily. Because, and we
yeah.
haven't talked about the adaptations yet, but in one of the adaptations, Anne goes with him,
That's true.
just like Mrs. Croft.
But the last line in Persuasion, his profession was all that could ever make her friends wish Anne's tenderness less, the dread of a future war, all that could dim her sunshine. She gloried in being a sailor's wife, but she must pay the tax of quick alarm for belonging to that profession, which is, if possible, more distinguished in its domestic virtues than in its national importance.
Do you think she went with him?
I hope so. I hope they were together, like Admiral Croft and Mrs. Croft.
Oh,
that
my
would be so
goodness.
lovely. I think 1995 Persuasion ends
Yes.
that way.
Yes, it does.
Whew, this just really elevated this for me. Speaking of our adaptations, Persuasion has been adapted into a TV miniseries, 2 TV movies, 2 modern takes, one of which is the second Bridget Jones's movie, The Edge of Reason, and of course the most recent 2022 Netflix movie starring Dakota Johnson and Cosmo Jarvis, which I'm sure we all have feelings about. So, are you familiar with any of these adaptations? Which is your favorite? Which is the worst?
Well, I haven't seen the old-timey miniseries. That's not true. I've seen part of it, but I kept falling asleep, so I sort of...
No.
It's very early 1980s kind of setting, but Delicia mentioned the 95 adaptation with Kieran Hines as Wentworth and Amanda Root as Aunt Elliot. Now, that to me is like the quintessential adaptation. 2007, Sally Hawkins and Rupert Henry Jones, who I think is a beautiful man. He's beautiful to look at, but is he a captain? I don't know. And I'm not going to talk about the most recent adaptation because there's a lot of loathing going on there.
I need to talk about the most recent
Please.
adaptation because I watched it this morning on this day that we are recording, and to highlight some reviews from this movie, it has a 30% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. The critic quote on Rotten Tomatoes is, "Persuasion fails to convince as a worthwhile Austen adaptation." And then in The Spectator, we have, "Everyone involved should be in prison."
Wow.
But I'm not a Dakota Johnson fan either. I think she's boring. But I was determined to watch this and not let outside opinions sway me, because sometimes people are purists. Sometimes people just can only think of what they would like to see or what they think would be classic, and it's hard to think outside of that. I get it. Sat down, tried to watch it. First 5 minutes, you've got Dakota Johnson as Anne, laying face down in her mattress, guzzling wine, crying. It's a mess, and that's not Anne at all. Within the first 5 minutes, we're breaking this heroine that we all loved so much. So I couldn't stand it. I watched the whole thing. I did not like it. There are 2 aspects of that adaptation that I enjoyed. Mary was hilarious and made an unlikable character absolutely a delight to watch. And Henry Golden in Regency attire. I would like to see more of this.
Rachel, have you seen any of the adaptations?
No, I'm not familiar with them. I'm a little scared to be familiar with the 2022 one.
Don't do
I might
it.
Give it a try. Which one did you recommend as like the
1995.
The
All right,
1995.
I will watch that one first.
What do you think, Delicia?
1995 is my absolute favorite. Not only is my favorite adaptation of Persuasion, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. But I do enjoy the 2007 adaptation as well. I realized I have seen Bridget Jones' Edge of Reason, and I didn't know that was based on Persuasion.
Neither
did I,
Now I
actually.
had to go back and look at it. I know the first one I
It's Pride
definitely
and
see, and I
Prejudice.
definitely can see that for the first film, but yeah, I had to go back and look at that. But yeah, I have seen that one.
Yeah, I can't see that. That's very loosely
Well,
based on Persuasion.
it's very loosely based, but the idea is that Bridget's silly little friends kind of persuade her of everything that is wrong with Mark Darcy and why it's not going to work out. And so she kind of self-destructs and they break up for a while. And then ultimately, you know, find their way back to each other at the end. So her friends are playing the role of Lady Russell, people who are kind of obsessed with things that are superficial and are convincing her to act against her, maybe not her best interest, but acting against like what her heart really wants.
So is Daniel Cleaver the Mr. Elliot of that scenario?
I guess so, yes, because he does come back into the picture during that time as well.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Okay. What is it about the 1995 or the 2007 that you think makes it so successful versus the 2022 that makes it such a flop?
Well, Amanda
And if anyone
Root-
listening actually really enjoys the 2022,
we apologize.
We apologize.
Amanda Root, I think, really takes hold of Anne's quiet brilliance very well. I think she's wonderful. You just see her big, giant eyes and just her look of understanding, especially when she's dealing with Captain Benwick and his sorrows, which we haven't touched upon, but he was a very sorrowful character that ended up with a happy situation. And I actually liked Sally Hawkins as Anne as well, except when they had her running through the streets of Bath looking for Captain Wentworth. That is so not Regency appropriate.
And
would never have happened. But otherwise, I did enjoy her as well. And she actually, in her own way, I mean, I know Dakota broke the fourth wall in the most recent adaptation, but Sally also kept looking at the camera, and that to me was unnerving. I'm like, stop looking at me, Anne Elliot. Stay in your story.
Well, with Persuasion, with the 2022 with Dakota Johnson, it spoon feeds you so much. It's all Dakota Johnson looking at the camera, basically reading the book to you, telling you exactly what the history is, telling you how she feels about it, but also not holding true to it because she is so much more chaotic than the book Anne Elliot is. I mean, Anne Elliot would not sit at the dinner table with her whole family and remind everybody at the table that Mary's husband wanted to marry her first.
Nope, absolutely not.
That was so uncomfortable, and she would never. So, for current reference, I found, let's see, this scene from the Lake House, because Rachel, I do a little pop culture to see if we can find references to Jane Austen's work in anything that is more recent. So The Lake House came out in 2006, starring Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves. They live in the same house, except they're separated by 2 years and use a magical time-traveling mailbox to communicate. This is so early 2000s. In this scene, Keanu Reeves' character knows who she is, but she does not know who he is. He has already found a copy of Persuasion that future Sandra Bullock has left, and that's why he knows to bring it up to her, even though she has no idea about any of this or who he is. So we're going to watch that little clip.
Have you read Persuasion?
What?
By Jane Austen.
I know it's what. Yeah, it's my favorite book. Why did you bring something like that up? What made you bring that up?
I just, a friend of mine gave it to me recently, and I was wondering what it was about.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's about waiting. These two people, they meet, they almost fall in love, but the timing isn't right. They have to part. And then years later, they meet again. They get another chance. You know, but they don't know if too much time has passed. They waited too long. And it's, you know, too late to make it work.
Why do you like that?
I don't know.
No, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's beautiful and I kind
No,
of...
it's terrible.
It's terrible.
And then, of course, we have The Edge of Reason, which lightly references Persuasion with the friends convincing her of everything that's wrong with Mark Darcy. What did you think of the lake house clip?
Who doesn't like Keanu Reeves?
I mean, it's true.
Especially with Sandra Bullock.
Yes, they have great chemistry.
That movie had such a chokehold at the time that it came out, I remember. All right, so closing thoughts, ratings. Rachel, if you have not listened to the other episodes, we close with a rating of teacups because it's Jane Austen and we love tea parties. So closing thoughts on the book, how would you rate it? How many teacups? Any final thoughts?
I definitely want to read it again. I think this one is probably one that gets even better on rereads, like Delicia was saying. Right now, I would give it 4 teacups out of 5.
Mm-hmm.
Well, having said this is one of my favorites, and I vacillate between it and P&P, it's 5 teacups for me.
All the teacups. 5 teacups.
I think I am
Nice.
also going. I think I am also going 5 teacups. And while we are here, so like I've been saying, we've so far read Sense and Sensibility, Persuasion, Mansfield Park. Out of those 3, where would you, if you've read all 3 of them, how would you rank them?
Well, Mansfield Park is definitely the lowest.
Oh no!
Yes, I agree.
Poor Mansfield Park.
Well, I had mentioned earlier that that's the only Jane Austen book I have not read, and I'm still trying to get through it a couple months after I started it. So
It was very difficult to get through, but it's strange. It was hard to get through, but at the same time, there was something really rewarding about the discussion afterwards. But I think my rating from best to least best, because I don't want to say it's bad.
Third best.
Third
Third
There you
best.
go.
Thank you, Rachel. I know how to talk. Would be Persuasion, Sense and Sensibility, and then Mansfield Park.
Yeah, I would
Agree.
agree.
Agreed. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us to talk about Persuasion. Thank you, Delicia, Lisa, and Rachel. The next book that we will discuss for the year with Jane Austen will be Emma. And it'll be my first time reading it, so I'm very excited about that.